Thomas Sharp's a bad guy.
Welcome to Gospel Tangents, the best source for Mormon history, science, and theology. I'm Rick Bennett. Thomas Ford was governor of Illinois in 1844 when Joseph and Hyrum were killed in the Carthage jail. We'll talk more about Governor Ford's role in the surrender of Joseph and Hyrum, as well as his efforts to get a trial against the murderers of Joseph and Hyrum Smith. Check out our conversation. One of the other things that I want to talk a little bit about,
the martyrdom, rather.
Well, the press is the expositor press is destroyed. Joseph is charged with riot originally. Then the charge gets upgraded to treason. And he brokers a deal with Governor Ford to go to Carthage. And so I would like to spend a little bit of time on what happens in Carthage there.
Okay. I brought you a gift. This is a video called Hancock County.
Okay.
And unopened.
All right.
You get it online.
Wow, thank you.
What happened is a few years ago, some LDS writers wrote a stage play of what happened during the trial. Now we'll get to that. Maybe I introduced that prematurely, but it's online too. On YouTube, you can watch all 12 segments for free.
Oh, wow.
And I'll tell you a little bit about that in a minute, because it has some lead up to the martyrdom.
So this is published by BYU, apparently. Mm-hmm. Okay.
People don't know that exists. It's a fun one if you're into church history.
Okay.
And again, it's free on YouTube if you just Google Hancock County BYU play.
Okay.
And it's 12 segments and you can watch it. But that's a DVD. So Joseph goes, like you said, to court, and the charge is riot. And he had declared martial law a couple days before to keep the peace in Nauvoo. Well, they come to post bond, and they had multiple, I think it's 5 assurances in the last week from Governor Ford that they will be safe, state protection, got Governor Ford's word, and they post bond, they put the money on the table, and they turn to walk away, and the charges are changed to treason. And the reason treason is significant is you can't post bail for treason. And they knew it. They had a laundry list. They were going to keep Joseph Smith there at any cost in Carthage, the people against the anti-Mormons. And so they put him over in a hotel and then eventually into Carthage jail for safekeeping. And they changed the trial date on him. He was supposed to be out June 27th, the day he was murdered, but they changed it. Well, the people in Warsaw are very much aware of what's going on. There's troops marching. Thomas Sharp writes, Warsaw's in a constant state of excitement. This is a week before the martyrdom. And Governor Ford on June 27th decides to go over to Nauvoo. And he takes about 400 or 500 troops, and a lot of them are from Warsaw. And he goes over and he basically scolds the saints. They had disarmed the Nauvoo militia, and because the charter had been revoked. Okay, well, I'm not sure if the charter was revoked before or after the martyrdom. It might have been after, but they had disarmed the Nauvoo Legion, I should say. And so Thomas Sharp goes.
Well, let me ask you this really quick, because by now there's a lot of animosity between Nauvoo and Warsaw. Was Carthage, and I do know it was the county seat, but was that considered kind of a neutral third party or not?
Absolutely not. They were anti-too. In fact, they'd have meetings in Warsaw, then have the same meetings in Carthage and vote the same way and pass some of the same resolutions. The anti-Mormon political party, the Hancock County on safety, those types of things, they were hand in hand.
Okay.
Anti-Mormon. Okay. So Thomas Ford goes to Nauvoo, and he's got 400 troops, some from Warsaw, and he goes to Nauvoo this is June 27th, to scold the saints, basically. Well, word in Warsaw is that Thomas Ford may be in trouble.
Governor Ford.
And so they gather 2 battalions of men in Warsaw and 1 in nearby Green Plains, and that was led by Levi Williams, Colonel Levi Williams. They meet, and on June 27th, they gather in the morning, and they're marching toward Nauvoo. Okay, there's about 300 or 400 of them. And they get to a crossroads. It's called Golden's Point, and it's still there today. And they're met by a messenger from Nauvoo the governor's messenger. The governor heard that there were some troops coming to Nauvoo to rescue him and actually to make war on the disarmed Latter-day Saints. Okay. So the messenger says, the governor says he knows that you're coming and he wants you to disperse and he wants you to go home. And so they meet and they talk. And some say, yeah, let's do what the governor says. One is the doctor. His name's Charles Hay. And he goes back to Nauvoo. His son becomes John Hay, who's Warsaw's by far most famous person. He was Secretary of State to several presidents and opened up the Panama Canal in China and did some things. And he also wrote about the murder later on. I'll tell you about that. So Charles Hay goes back with a bunch of people. But Thomas Sharp and a bunch of them stand up and say, you know what? We've gone this far. Instead of going to Nauvoo to rescue the governor, let's just go and get rid of Joseph Smith. And he's up talking, and he says, if we get rid of Joseph Smith, if we go and get rid of Joseph Smith right now, the Mormons will hear about it, and they'll kill Governor Ford. And we'll have two of our problems solved on the same day.
Wow.
They were having problems with Governor Ford because Governor Ford was kind of playing both sides and wasn't getting rid of the Mormons. They'd asked Governor Ford to expel the Latter-day Saints earlier.
As had been done in Missouri earlier.
So they were trying to follow that. So while Thomas Sharp's talking, a messenger comes from Carthage, and a guard there named Frank Worrell. Frank Worrell writes a note, and he says, now is the time to do the deed. And he sends it to Sharp. Sharp reads it, and he rallies the troops, and they go on to Carthage and commit the crime of murdering Joseph and Hyrum. That night, they make a beeline back to Warsaw, to this Warsaw House Hotel. It's ran by Sam and Ann Graham Fleming. And Sam's out in Boston, but it's a restaurant, it's a hotel, it's a livery, and some other things. It's a big facility. And Thomas Sharp's the first one back at about 9 p.m., June 27th, 1844, and he asks the waitress, 18-year-old Eliza Graham. Eliza Graham's the niece of the owner, Ann Graham, for a glass of water. Nobody knew that Eliza and her dad, they were living in Nauvoo. Eliza came down to help her aunt run the Warsaw House. She was a member of the church. 18-year-old. Thomas Sharp comes in. Other people come in. Jacob Davis. People who would eventually stand trial. And they started talking and bragging about how they just killed Joseph Smith. And Eliza's like, whoa. Her aunt is in the back cooking. 50 men gather, and they go from 9 p.m. to 2 a.m. And they're all talking about who did what. And I was climbing the stairs of the Carthage jail, and it was my gun that shot Joseph. And then somebody else would say, no, it was mine. Thomas Sharp and Jacob Davis together said, we have finished off the leading men of the Mormon Church. And Eliza, brilliant, remembers, and she later testifies in the trial. Okay, and so does her aunt for the opposite side. About 2 a.m.
Oh, really?
2 a.m. they go upstairs. The people who live there, Jacob Davis and another goes upstairs. I think it was Jacob Davis and another goes upstairs. And I was telling the story to my wife, and my wife says, "Ann, they must have been tired. Killing Mormon prophets is hard work." So they go upstairs where their rooms are, and they stay. And there's different stories. Warsaw was afraid that the Saints would retaliate, so they vacated the city. But before they did, the day after, at 4 p.m., June 28th, there's a big rally downtown on Main Street of Warsaw, and they throw their hats in the air and celebrate that they finally got rid of their nemesis, Joseph Smith, and the Mormon prophet. And they really thought the Mormon church would dissolve and disintegrate really quickly. Of course it didn't. So, Governor Ford is just appalled. He's given his word. He later in his history writes that he feels like Pontius Pilate in the Bible, that who betrayed Jesus, that he betrayed Joseph and the Mormons. He commits that there would be a trial. So in October...
Wait, before we get to the trial,
okay.
One other thing that I do want to bring up, and I think that this is a little bit surprising to some people that aren't as familiar, is that there was a gun smuggled into the jail that Joseph had. Can you talk us a little bit about that?
I'm not an expert, but he had actually two. One was a pepper box, and another one was a gun. I believe it was Cyrus Wilcox. like I said, there's people that certainly have written more about this. But he had two guns. And so people say, well, was it a wild, wild west shootout? Absolutely.
Well, how do you smuggle a gun into the jail?
Well, there's no metal detectors. It's 1840. He's not in jail. He's not convicted. He's just in a holding place that was safe.
Okay.
He's waiting a hearing. He hasn't been convicted of anything. And they said, we want you to stay around and we'll put you in the safest place we have. And it was in a bedroom, not the cell.
Okay.
So he had visitors freely coming and going. And they said, you know what? This may not be safe for you, so here's a pistol. Well, he got, the story is, John Taylor and other people wrote that he got 3 shots off down the hall, and there was some stories back and forth. It has a fanciful ending, but the fate of the persecutors of the prophet Joseph Smith up until the very end has some great details, that book, of what happened in the jail with the gun, with the mob, and things like that.
Okay, so this is a typical jail. It's not like going to this point of the mountain or anything.
No. Well, there is a room that's a cell, but he's not convicted. He's not a criminal. He's just being held in it's a safe house.
Okay, so he's being held in a bedroom.
Upstairs. Yeah.
Upstairs. He's got visitors coming, because I believe it was both he and Hyrum that were charged with riot/treason.
And it's because he declared martial law was the treason charge.
Okay, well, and I know Mike Quinn has done some work on, there was some reaching out to Great Britain or something. Are you familiar with that?
No.
Okay, well, I'll have to try to talk to Mike
because
again,
when the saints left, they left early because the United States government had heard that they were going to reach out to Great Britain, because Great Britain was settling Oregon. Mm-hmm. And they were afraid the Mormons were going to take their guns and rebel against the United States and come back. And so Brigham Young left early in February over a frozen Mississippi to avoid the United States Army that was going to come and set up a blockade to strip the saints of their guns. I don't know if that has anything to do with what you're talking about, and that's a little later on.
Well, it just seems like, I know that there was some things in the Nauvoo Expositor, and I know Quinn has made a big deal about some of this treason charge was, I know a lot of people like to say it was trumped up, and I do believe that to some degree it was, but there was some substance to that treason charge, I believe, as well.
My understanding is it all revolved around because Joseph declared martial law.
Well, because I know polygamy was a big deal, but there was also a treason charge, I believe, in the Expositor, and
Yeah.
I'll have to see if I can get Quinn to talk more about that. But
Yeah. Please do, because your Nauvoo people need to be talking about the Expositor. I'll talk about what Sharp and the people in Warsaw reacted to.
Yeah,
And they welcomed these people. In fact, later on they had a meeting where they had the Laws and the Higbees all come and meet with the mob in Warsaw a few weeks later about their next plan. Now that they killed Joseph, what should we do? So they were welcoming of anybody who was against the church down in Warsaw.
Yeah. So we've got Joseph and Hyrum in jail, and then Willard Richards and John Taylor were just visiting when the mob came.
Right.
And how many people would you say were from Warsaw versus Carthage in this mob? Do we have any sense for that?
Oh, they were almost all from Warsaw.
Everybody
Green
was
Plains. Two-thirds about were from Warsaw, and a third was from Green Plains. Now, Green Plains is a few miles away. Today, it's just a farmer's field. But it was a little thriving city. There's a cemetery in a farmer's field. It's almost like it was cursed or something. There's nothing there anymore.
Okay.
So it was 2 detachments from Warsaw, 1 from Green Plains, and they joined together. Levi Williams, one of the 5, he was the only one that was charged that wasn't from Warsaw. So he was from Green Plains. The other 4 were from Warsaw: Grover and Aldrich and Davis and Sharp were the 4, plus Levi Williams. So the deed is done at the jail, and there's different accounts, and I have one account that's maybe a little more fanciful of after Joseph was killed. There was a beam of light. That's disputed. But
I've heard that's disputed.
There's an account that happened, and the people who shot him stood motionless, and they had to be loaded into a wagon to keep Joseph. They were going to cut. There was a bounty on Joseph's head to cut it off. Somebody wanted it for a trophy. That never happened. Somebody yelled, "The Mormons are coming!" They all got scared. They all drove off to Warsaw, to the Warsaw House Hotel, to brag about it till 2 a.m. in the morning.
Yeah.
So The fall, there's a grand jury. Eliza Graham's uncle, Anne Graham Fleming's brother, sits on the grand jury, Thomas Graham, and they say, yeah, there's enough evidence to have a trial. Now, they don't have trials all the time in this part of the state in this era. They have court weeks twice a year. A circuit court would come around. And so in May of 1845 in Carthage, they have this trial for the murder of Joseph Smith, but the charge wasn't murder. It was for the conspiracy to commit murder. Okay? That's a lot lower threshold. So you have Lamburn, Hosea Lamburn is the attorney for the prosecution. And he's gathering witnesses for the prosecution. And bringing in the 12 tell the church, don't participate. First of all, it's a sham trial. Second of all, you're probably not going to be safe. If Joseph and Hyrum weren't safe in Carthage, do you think you're going to be safe if you go to the trial? So they actually try to avoid subpoena, and they hide. And so John Taylor doesn't go, Willard Richard doesn't go, and they were eyewitnesses to the crime.
Right.
But they find a week before, Lamburn goes to Nauvoo and finds Eliza Graham. So you were the waitress there that night at the Warsaw House Hotel. Will you come? And she reluctantly comes. There's 6 witnesses for the prosecution, and so the court starts. It's presided over by Judge Young, and Judge Young had been on the Illinois Supreme Court, and he's pretty versed. He's a circuit court judge, and
Can you talk about who the defendants are?
Yeah. So the defendants, well, there's a couple attorneys, and we've talked about Calvin Warren.
Mm-hmm.
Calvin Warren, who declared bankruptcy because Joseph Smith and the Latter-day Saints would not buy his land in South Warsaw. Okay, and who defended Joseph Smith. He's one of the defense attorneys. So you got 5 defendants. You've got Jacob Davis, who was a school teacher. You've got Mark Aldrich, who declared bankruptcy because Joseph wouldn't buy his land. You got Thomas Sharp, the anti-Mormon newspaper. You got Levi Williams and William Grover.
Now, more people were charged, is that correct?
There were 9 charged and 4 fled.
Now, these 4 that fled, some of them were injured by the bullets that Joseph shot, right?
Depends on who you talk to.
Okay.
There are some unsubstantiated tales that somebody got hit. And there was one account, I think, that somebody died, that there's no evidence of that, but there's some people got hit. Gallagher was one, and he was celebrated. He was from Green Plains, and the local people thought he was a hero. They bought him a suit for the trial, but he dodged and left. So.
Okay. So are you saying that these people weren't injured, or?
There are accounts. There's a couple people. Joseph got 3 shots off.
Right.
Now there's one account that when Joseph opened the door, he thought it was the Nauvoo Legion coming to get him, and he opened the door, kind of in celebration, and he looks down the hall. There's a little landing and then the stairs,
mm-hmm.
and he realizes the people coming up they'd taken gunpowder and mud to cover their identity, and he realizes it's not the Nauvoo Legion, and he quickly realizes it's a mob, and he coils back, and he's a very strong guy, and he punches the first guy in the face. This is one account, and they tumble down the stairs, and they regroup at the bottom of the stairs and come back up. There's different accounts
mm-hmm.
of what happened in Carthage.
But he definitely
shot
3 times. Because I've heard that there were at least 3 people injured, and
There could have been.
and they were the ones who fled because, hey, if you were injured, you were there, right?
But this is important. Let me tell you what happens at the trial and why it doesn't matter who was there for the charges that were there, that were levied against the 5. They gathered together. It was common in the time that they're not only hearing the case. It was called the People versus Levi Williams, but they were listening to other court cases that had built up for the last 6 months, because again, every 6 months the traveling court would come. People would come for entertainment. They didn't have TV, internet, whatever, so they'd come down to court for a free show. But there'd be all these other cases, so there'd be a jury, and the expert book on this is still Down Oaks and Marv Hill's Carthage Conspiracy.
And Marvin has passed away, right? I believe so. If that's not true, hopefully, Marvin, you can come and talk to me.
Yeah. Maybe you can get some time with Elder Unks.
Yeah, we'll see. I
he
have a
actually wrote
feeling.
me a letter about my book.
Oh, he did?
That's another story. So,
I hope you enjoyed our conversation with author Brian Stutzman. In our next conversation, we'll talk about the outcome of the trial for Joseph and Hyrum's murderers. Is it true some people got away with murder?
a legal lynching. And then, as we talked about, later on, the trial was not for who pulled the trigger, but who were the soul of the movement. You can't say that Thomas Sharp was not the soul of the movement. Well, years later, somebody asked Thomas Sharp, so, did you kill Joseph Smith?
If you'd like to hear the entire interview uncut, please support Gospel Tangents and become a subscriber. For just $5 a month, go to patreon.com/gospeltangents and you can hear the entire interview. And you can also get transcripts available at either our Amazon website, or if you want to give the money to me and not Amazon, please subscribe on my website at gospeltangents.com and you can click the yellow subscribe button. Of course, we're also on Facebook, Twitter, and all the other places. Make sure you subscribe on iTunes at tinyurl.com/gospeltangents. And don't forget to click here to subscribe on YouTube, here for a transcript, and over here we've got some more of our great videos. Thanks again for listening.